History was made today, not in the halls of Congress, not at a campaign rally, not in a policy speech, in a New York courtroom that transformed a former president convicted of 34 felony counts into something no American president has ever been before: a convicted felon. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't a plea deal. This wasn't a settlement. This was a federal judge speaking directly into the court record, officially declaring a former president of the United States guilty. And in 10 days, that same convicted felon will place his hand on a Bible and take the oath of office for a second term as president. Legal scholars called it unprecedented. Constitutional experts called it a crisis. Federal prosecutors called it justice. And Donald Trump called it a witch hunt. But today, none of those opinions mattered, because today, the only voice that mattered belonged to Judge Juan Merchan. The virtual courtroom. The Zoom screen flickered to life at exactly 9:30 a.m. Judge Merchan adjusted his microphone. Court reporters positioned their fingers over keyboards. Camera operators in the overflow room leaned forward, and on a screen mounted in the center of courtroom 1530, Donald Trump's face appeared, connecting from Mar-a-Lago, 1,200 miles away. Not in person, not standing at the defense table like every other defendant, through a screen from his Florida estate. "Mr. Trump," the judge began, his voice cutting through the courtroom silence, "you have been convicted by a jury of your peers of falsifying business records on 34 counts. It is now my duty to impose sentence." The room held its breath. Trump's face remained expressionless on the screen. For weeks, everyone had been wondering, what would the judge do? Would he impose jail time, a fine, probation, or nothing at all? Trump's attorneys had argued for weeks. They claimed presidential immunity. They demanded constitutional protections. They requested the sentencing be postponed until after January 20th. Judge Merchan denied everything. Prosecutors argued that Trump needed to face real consequences. They emphasized that justice must be applied equally to everyone. They reminded the court that no one is above the law. But Judge Merchan faced an unprecedented situation. The man he was sentencing would become President of the United States in 10 days, the most powerful person in the world, the person with access to nuclear codes, the commander of the military. And the judge had to make a decision that no one, in 248 years of American history, had ever had to make. "The verdict this court," Merchan said, choosing his words carefully, "determines that the only lawful sentence is unconditional discharge. No jail time, no fine, no probation, but the conviction remains. Permanently, forever." Donald Trump is now officially a convicted felon, and that status will never be erased. As Judge Merchan explained his decision, he carefully laid out his reasoning. He emphasized Trump's age, 78 years old, a man with no prior criminal record. He noted Trump's impending presidency, a conviction that would cast a shadow over the nation's highest office. "The only appropriate sentence," the judge said, "is unconditional discharge. This sentence preserves the permanent record of conviction while avoiding conflict with the approaching presidential duties." In other words, Judge Merchan was saying, you are guilty. That fact doesn't change. But the fact that you are a president-elect chosen by the American people doesn't change either. And I, as a judge, cannot obstruct a democratic election. This is a legal paradox, a constitutional tension, a collision between democracy and justice. And standing right in the middle of that collision was Judge Merchan. On one side was a jury verdict, guilty on 34 counts. On the other side was an election result where 77 million Americans cast their votes. Which should take precedence? Judge Merchan chose both. He affirmed the guilt but preserved the freedom. When Trump spoke from the screen, his voice was sharp and defiant. "This case was a political witch hunt," he said. "I was not treated fairly. I did nothing wrong. This jury was biased. This judge was biased. The entire system was biased." Judge Merchan didn't react. He didn't respond. He just listened. Trump continued, "This case should never have been brought. This was a political attack by the Manhattan District Attorney. Alvin Bragg brought this case for political reasons, and the people saw through it. That's why I was re-elected president." Judge Merchan remained silent, because as a judge, that was all he could do. Responding to political opinions wasn't his job. Applying the law was. And today, that's exactly what he did. At the end of the sentencing hearing, Judge Merchan said one final thing. The words would be brief, formal, and surprisingly gracious. "Sir," Merchan said, looking at Trump's face on the screen, "I wish you Godspeed as you begin your second term in office." A judge had just found a former president guilty of 34 crimes. But the same judge was now wishing that same man's success in his presidency. Was this just courtesy, or was it something deeper? Perhaps Judge Merchan was saying, "I've done my job. The jury has done its job. Now, Mr. Trump, it's time for you to do yours. And I hope you succeed, because your failure would mean America's failure." Perhaps the judge was demonstrating that he was preserving the fine line between law and politics. He wasn't angry at Trump. He wasn't in a personal conflict. He was simply applying the law. And once the law was applied, wishing the president's success was appropriate. Or perhaps Judge Merchan was simply making a human gesture. A simple courtesy to a 78-year-old man facing the immense responsibility ahead. Whatever the real reason, those words entered the court record. They will go into history books, and they will be analyzed for years to come. The sentencing hearing is over. The gavel struck, the Zoom connection ended, Trump disappeared from the screen, and the courtroom emptied. However, the effects of what happened today are just beginning. The aftermath. Trump's legal team immediately released a statement. "This decision is a clear violation of the Constitution," they said. "It ignores presidential immunity. It undermines the democratic process, and we will appeal." But their chances of appeal are extremely low, because previously the upper court and even the Supreme Court rejected Trump's requests to stop the sentencing. The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, said the sentencing must proceed. Conservative justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito voted against, but the majority said presidential immunity does not apply to criminal prosecutions. In other words, the Supreme Court said, being president doesn't mean being above the law. This decision is a major turning point in American constitutional history, because for the first time the Supreme Court explicitly stated that a president is not immune from criminal prosecution. What happens now? In 10 days, on January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump will become president again. He will place his hand on the Bible. He will take the presidential oath, and he will return to the Oval Office. But now he'll return as a convicted felon. This isn't just a problem for Trump. This is a problem for all of America, because this situation raises very serious constitutional questions. Can a convicted felon appoint federal judges? Can a convicted felon enforce laws? Can a convicted felon pardon other criminals? Can a convicted felon represent America on the world stage? The Constitution doesn't answer these questions, because the Founding Fathers never imagined such a scenario. And now America must learn the answers to these questions in real time. Law professors are describing this situation as unprecedented. A professor from Harvard Law School said, In our 248-year history, nothing like this has ever happened, and nobody knows how this will turn out. Former federal prosecutors say the situation creates a dangerous precedent, because in the future, another president could point to Trump's situation and say, "I was also convicted, but I'm still president." Constitutional scholars note that American democracy is experiencing a stress test. Can the system withstand this tension, or will it break? Trump's supporters view today's sentencing as a legal show. There's no punishment, they say, so the whole case was meaningless. But Trump's opponents see the permanent conviction record as a triumph of justice. The criminal record will never be erased, they say. History will remember him as guilty. Both sides are partly right, and both sides are partly wrong, because the truth is, this situation isn't black and white. This is ambiguity. This is complexity. This is a tension that American democracy has never experienced, and this tension will continue for the next 4 years. As president, can Trump pardon himself for the conviction? Legal experts say no, because this is a state crime, not a federal crime. And presidents cannot pardon state crimes. So can Trump pressure the governor of New York? The governor could pardon Trump. But New York Governor Kathy Hochul is a Democrat, and she probably won't pardon Trump, so Trump will remain a convicted felon for 4 years, maybe 8 years if he's reelected. This isn't just Trump's personal problem. This is a test of American institutions. The courts did their job. The jury did its job. The judge did his job. Now the American people are watching. And the question is this system resilient? Is this system fair? Is this system working? The answer will become clear over the next 4 years. Today, Judge Juan Merchan made a historic decision. He convicted a president but set him free. He applied justice but also protected democracy. Whether this was the right decision, time will tell. But one thing is certain. Today, one of the most unusual